Okay, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're taking what might seem like a dry academic concept and showing you how it's actually a critical life and death framework. Engineering ethics isn't just about memorizing rules to pass a test, it is literally the invisible foundation supporting the bridges we cross, the buildings we work in, and the cars we drive every single day. Here's our roadmap for today. We'll be covering what engineering ethics actually is, professional codes of conduct, when to blow the whistle, deadly engineering failures, and finally, making the right choice. Let's get into it. All right, Section 1. What is engineering ethics? There's this fantastic quote from Potter Stewart that says, "Ethics is knowing the difference between what you have a right to do and what is right to do." And honestly, that just hits the nail on the head, right? It perfectly captures this constant tug-of-war tension between legality and morality. Just because a contract says you technically can do something doesn't automatically mean it's the right thing for society. So let's set the baseline here. Basically, ethics is a set of moral values and principles which form the standards of the code of conduct governing good and bad behavior. But when we apply this to engineering, we aren't just talking about individual people. We're talking about rules that govern massive organizations and the entire profession. It's the groundwork for literally everything else we're going to talk about. Ethical considerations absolutely cannot be an afterthought. They have to be this foundational, integral part of the balancing act required when you're making engineering decisions. Your obligations go way beyond just checking the boxes on a client contract. You have to constantly weigh how your work actually impacts the real world around you. Which brings us to a really crucial concept: preventative ethics. Because engineering isn't just about scrambling to fix problems after they happen, it's about thinking ahead. It's anticipating the possible consequences of your actions and deciding the ethically correct way to handle a situation before any harm can occur, like long before ground is even broken on a project. Okay, moving on to Section 2, professional codes of conduct. If you take a look at the major governing bodies in engineering, places like the NSP, IEEE, or IEB, and you distill all their massive rule books down, they all overlap on these absolute non-negotiables. Number 1, hold paramount public safety and welfare. Period. Plus, you have to perform services only in your actual areas of competence, completely avoid deceptive acts and conflicts of interest, and absolutely reject bribery. These are basically the bedrock rules of the trade. But hey, before we go pointing fingers at giant corporations, we kind of need to look in the mirror. Personal ethics start right at our own desks with everyday decisions. Think about it: software piracy, copying homework, casually borrowing office supplies, plagiarism, or even padding an expense account. They might feel like small, victimless things at the time, but they literally lay the groundwork for how we handle the huge ethical dilemmas later on. The tricky part is, as you scale up into the professional world, standards can start to feel a bit relative, you know? Ethical issues are seldom perfectly black and white. Suddenly, you find yourself standing at an intersection where the signs for right, wrong, and it depends are all just kind of blurring together. And what exactly creates that blur? Well, it's usually conflicting demands in the workplace. You might find your loyalty to your company and your coworkers totally clashing with your duty to public welfare. Throw personal ambition and career goals into the mix, and you've got a really tense situation. It's that ultimate heart-dropping moment in a career. What do you do when your boss says go, but your moral compass is screaming stop? This leads us right into Section 3, when to blow the whistle. So, whistleblowing. What is it? It's exposing misconduct or illegal activity happening inside an organization. We're talking fraud, major health and safety violations, or straight-up corruption. The term itself comes from a referee blowing a whistle to stop foul play on the field. And honestly, it is often the ultimate act of moral courage when a system is just completely failing from the inside out. An engineer stuck in this awful situation really has two main paths. They can make internal allegations, which means reporting the issue within the company and, hoping the system fixes itself. Or they can make external allegations, taking the whole thing to regulators, law enforcement, or even the media. Choosing between keeping it in-house or going public, that is an absolutely life-altering decision. But when is taking that massive leap actually justified? Because it's not something you do lightly. The potential public harm has to be incredibly serious. Also, you have to have tried talking to your immediate superiors, maybe even the board of directors, and been totally ignored. Crucially, you need a documented paper trail. You need hard evidence that would convince an impartial observer that real danger is imminent, and that blowing the whistle is the only way to prevent that harm. All right, let's look at the dark side of this in Section 4, Deadly Engineering Failures. First up, we have the Space Shuttle Challenger disaster from 1986. Here's how it unfolded. Step 1, the design used a gasketed connection with totally insufficient data to predict how it would handle different conditions. Step 2, instead of pausing, management put intense pressure on the engineers to launch anyway, just to meet their schedule. This led to Step 3, where fatal, poor engineering judgment completely overrode safety. And then Step 4, the tragic loss of the entire crew. It shattered public confidence in the space program for years. Now take a look at this number, $450 million. That's how much the Ford Motor Company faced in lawsuits and personal injury cases over the Pinto. But as we know, the real cost wasn't just paid in dollars. The Ford Pinto catastrophe was an absolute ethical collapse. We're talking over 500 documented, completely preventable deaths from rear-end collisions and thousands of seriously burned vehicles. The company nearly went completely under because of the lost public trust. And why? All because known design flaws were purposely ignored just to rush a product to market. And then there's the Hyatt Regency walkway collapse in 1981, which is just a chilling example of what happens when basic professional competence fails. A support system was changed in the shop drawings. Step 2, an engineer simply failed to review those changes. That one little lapse, it literally doubled the physical load on the supports. The result was a 32-ton walkway collapsing onto a crowded floor, causing 114 deaths. The engineers involved were prosecuted, and rightly so. Which brings us to our final part, Section 5, making the right choice. When you find yourself facing a high-stakes decision behind closed doors, you really need to run through a mental checklist. Is it safe? Is it legal? Is it just, balanced, and fair? These are the immediate preventative questions you have to ask yourself. You've got to check your own moral compass before you ever sign off on a design or cave to a manager's demands. But you've got to go deeper than that. Ask yourself, how will this decision make me feel about myself? And here's the big one. If something terrible happened, could I actually defend my actions? It forces you to mentally step into the aftermath of a total disaster and honestly ask yourself if your engineering judgment could survive public, media, and legal scrutiny. You really have to ask, does this choice lead to the greatest good for the greatest number of people, or are you just doing what you have the quote-unquote right to do on a technicality? I want to leave you with this final thought to ponder for your own professional journey. When the pressure is on, when the deadlines are looming and the stakes are incredibly real, will you have the courage to choose what is truly right over what is simply allowed?